Hi there, Randy Green here. Welcome to a little Whole Academy Changemaker podcast. And this is a project, so that means we are in work in progress. And we haven't got all the answers yet, and we haven't got all the solutions yet, but we are a group of people that are trying to figure out, okay, we are standing in mud to, how far are we? Knees, hips, chest, chin? I don't know. But, and in that process, we have got some challenges that we need to deal with. And for those of you who are familiar with the Whole Academy website and been there, you will see I got 3 pillars, and one is, with the, what we call the progression work. And then I have the second pillar where I used to have the new reality that has been changed. And I've transferred that into the Systemic Energetic Awareness Forum, which used to be a higher awareness lifestyle, or the Randy Green Advanced Psychotherapy website, which I have changed. Sorry about that, which I have changed into that because of many different reasons, which is all about when we are in what we could call a crisis situation. What is most important? Is it that's kind of what we call triage, right? So that's why we are new. And we are now there because of the changes in our sun, the situation on our planet. And then we need to look at what's most important. But it does not take away the psychological work. It has other reasons as well. Which I will explain here, because this is kind of starting up the Changemaker podcast on YouTube. And as always, you know, I work in processes, and I initiate processes with a pattern of change, a pattern of thoughts that I want to share, so that you kind of get on, okay, this is where we are now. This is what we work with now, to kind of set a direction of what we are doing here, because there's enough to embark on and there's enough to begin with. So on my Whole Academy website, you will see you still have the progression work, the progression sciences. I completed that here this year. All of the courses there are now ready in how do you work with energy? How do you transform your energy system? How do you clear your energy system? How do you activate your energy system? What is the purpose of activating your energy system in the sciences that I have recalled from the original Pillar Project? What is the idea behind the transformative energy system? How can you utilize that to transform energy, create patterns of change, and by that begin to instigate what we could call the higher order sciences into our reality? Because that's what the Whole Academy is all about. It's about new ways of thinking, new ways of processing energy, and new ways of working with complex information systems, because we're moving into the 5th cycle. And for those of you still stuck in the 4th and are struggling to get control of your vibrational field, that is the heart field, the key essence, the timeline work, and the dealing with the different colonizing races and energetic parasites and alien invasion technology and inserted technology, you got enough on your hands, and that's where you're doing your Changemaker material, and that's your Changemaker project, to change yourself from being a base program human under enslavement programs, under prohibiting technologies, under restrictions, and get off and in part of what we call the network, holographic network of the 4th cycle, that are now collapsing because the 4th cycle networks within our reality field, within the enclosure, were highly connected to the density 2 level or a sun, and that is now in its last stages collapsing and shutting down, and we are resuming a density 1 sun. And that changes our entire planetary construction to resume its original outer domain density 1 features. And with that, new sciences, new understandings, new reality, new challenges, and new ways of being human. So this is the process that we are in. And that's where the Changemaker comes in. Because even though I play on the idea of social entrepreneurship, and in the Changemaker course material, I have 4 courses where we deal with the psychological side of being a changemaker and what it actually means to be a whole changemaker, dealing with the transformation of energy. Because it's not just about coming up with the great technological ideas, that's part of it, but it's also to understand how to work with the planetary sciences within a density 1 scope, how to work with technology that is suitable for the position of our solar system in the outskirts of this galaxy close to the abyss. How do we avoid, sorry about that, how do we avoid falling, being dragged into the abyss and into the previous third cycle energies? How do we deal with the challenges, the counter forces that are coming from the abyss due to opening of all gate systems that are now spawning to life because of the density 1 energies, because of the original dynamics and features of the outer domain and what the outer domain originally was utilized for. I talk about that both in the progression sciences as well as in the changemaker. So when I talk about being a changemaker, it's not about you, oh yeah, you go out and come up with brilliant ideas to solve poverty and inequity and gender bias and whatever we have got going out there. That's part of it. That's kind of what we call the tangible project, where you see how this transformation of energy, the complex work with patterns of change, the higher order abilities that you have after you have activated your energy system, how you can transfer that into something practical, low practical, that actually instigates a change. And if you are working with what we call third cycle energies, you would prefer to do it within technology and within frequency sciences, what we call macro type of sciences, where you're working with physics and you're working with chemical reactions and you're understanding the planet as a chemical ball of different types of atomic energies and its different types of elements that are playing together within fields of energy that are interacting and have feedback loops and amplification vectors that are enhancing. So we don't have a linear progression. We actually have an exponential progression in all of our systems on our planet. And science is beginning to learn that. So the challenge is there. How do you deal with these chaos fields that are going from order into entropy? How do you stop that entropy? And that's what's going to drag us into the abyss. Where does the entropy come from? It comes from what we could say the third cycle energy and the timeline event that reversed everything. Instead of having a system that worked within energies and fields that led to progression, we are now within fields that lead to entropy and regression. So that's the steep learning curve and uphill work that we will be doing constantly. That's why it's been referred to in the spiritual teachings that those who do the transition, they are going through the eye of the needle. They are taking the small path. They're not taking the broad path where the majority of humans will just follow the flow of energies. What is going on out there, they will just follow with the flow with the masses, and they will just give into that type of energy and go with whatever is the majority of opinion, of ideas, and whatever is going on, solutions run by governments, run by what we call the collective and the institutions. So for the whole change makers, we are the pioneers. So this is where we take the progression sciences, and I'm going to make a new second pillar because, as I said, I moved the new reality sciences into the Systemic Energetic Awareness Forum, where I'm going to work with the alien agenda in my version of it, because we've had plenty of people out there already giving you the traditional, typical UFO research, alien, extraterrestrial research ideas that as long as I've seen them, they were interesting, and I have enjoyed their work, and they have been the forerunners in their field during the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. But we need to change that too. We need to move into the next step. And that goes with the sciences, that goes with the spirituality, that goes with everything that's connected to the old world order. It's time to really get to the next step of human evolution. And that's the fifth cycle. And that's where we're heading. And that's where science plays a huge part, where you could say the vibrational field and compassion and empathy and psychological work played a huge part in the fourth cycle, which most humans have not really nailed yet. And that's the progression sciences, where I sum all of that up and give you the tools to work psychologically and work in your own manner to get to the point where you understand the inner human and what that actually is. And that's also one of the reasons why I think and feel that also, if I compare the work I've been doing with people since 2007 and the result I've got of it is, of course, yes, I have changed individuals. The ones I've been working with have had a huge effect of it. They have been very pleased with it. It has pushed them further in their personal progression journey in their own. They have shifted jobs. They have left marriages. They have developed themselves in new ways. They have come to terms with who and what they are. They have dealt with difficult issues from abuse to all sorts of things that have led them to be a better version of themselves, to create a new narrative of who they are, how they perceive themselves, not as being bogged down by shame or not feeling good enough or lack of self-worth and all of these things, and come into a position where they could actually say, well, I am ready to go out there and make a difference. I am ready to go out there and take my part, that responsibility, and work with that section of reality that is my little locality, my little world that is around me. So I know I can do that. And at some later point, I might take it back up. But right now I am looking into more, okay, you can do that in the self-study, in the progression sciences. And there are plenty of therapists out there that are good at what they are doing and will assist you and help you in that manner. So you can say my psychotherapy work is in a way put on hold, because it is not what is most important right now. What you will get, you can get from these 3 podcasts. You can get the boost there. What I would say typically in these sessions, I put into the progression science course material. You can do the courses. You'll get the answers you might ask me, and I'll give you that answer. You will get the dynamics, the processes, what you need to deal with, and in a manner where you can work at your own pace and not have me impatiently kicking you in the butt every time we would talk, telling you need to do more, you can do better, come on, you got the skill set, you got the genetics for it, why you're not clearing more, why you're not putting more in more hours, why you're not doing what you're supposed to do, how fucking difficult can it be? So that's kind of where I'm a little bit impatient, because it is, when we come to when we talk about one of the great issues of the 4th cycle due to the prohibiting technology, is that understanding that how much of the human energy, the heart field energy that's constantly being sucked out of people, and by that deprive them of that effectivity that they should have to actually progress, to work against the 3rd cycle energies, work against the effects of the timeline event, also explained in the whole transition science material. So it's all there. I put it there. Whatever you could ask me, it's in the classes. So for some of you that wants kind of, oh yeah, I want to do sessions with you, do the classes instead. You get much more out of it. Yeah, it costs you more money, but if you were interested in changing the world and changing yourself and changing your surroundings and actually do something about being awakened and aware, you have the skill set for it. You're part of the military projects that kind of fizzled out and led to nothing, except from quite a lot of the ones in their 40s that were part of these military projects have now either been taken over by the Orions and are struggling with that, or have got themselves entangled into conspiracy theories where they have been let down the rabbit hole to somewhere that leads to nothing good other than a danger to the entire world that we're living in. Seriously, I'm seeing that with a lot of the military projects. They were hijacked when we got linked up to the Dark Galactic Core in 2017, and are now under the Dark Conglomerate, and they don't know it. They still think they're fighting for justice and fighting for what they were engineered to fight for, but the ones that were behind it kind of left the scene, and they are floating around and have no guidance of where to go and how to go and these kind of things. We're seeing the same thing with the hybrid projects, not going well either. So we are having the issues because the different groups that have been here, and I've been dealing with a lot of alien stuff and always have had that as part of my life. And it's completely natural to me to talk to different alien groups, as natural as it is for me to talk with humans. You write me an email asking me questions. I have aliens coming in doing the exact same thing. So there's nothing there for me that's new. So that's my life. That's my everyday life. And they are not on top of things either. We have had incoming groups that didn't know what they came into. We have had the colonizing racing, bringing in slaves, bringing in souls, so to speak, energy systems and templates from other systems, putting them into these human forms. And humans are waking up and not knowing what they are, not knowing where to go, and not knowing what to do with what they know. And we have this huge gap of a world that is not yet engineered or tailored a program to be able to handle true skill sets of higher order sciences or true skill sets of higher types of consciousness. We are still locked in to that kind of old world order programming of linear, generic human thought processes, which we are seeing different of the hybrid project. Youngsters are showing signs of having a different way of thinking and processing information. I just watched a documentary called Greta, satire on Greta Thunberg, and that she has been diagnosed with Asperger and different kind of symptoms. Another syndrome, I forgot what that is called, but that's kind of where she got depressed as 11-year-old, and she kind of went into herself and she stopped eating. And for me, that's the activation process. That's completely an activation process. And then she came out on the other end, and then she became the climate activist, and she's doing it in her own way. She's very stern. She's very, this has to be done my way. I have to do it this way. And she's struggling with her parents. In that movie, we're seeing how she's very focused on what she's dealing with. She's got photographic memory, and she's working a specific way. She's being direct. She's being honest. She's not playing the social game. She's looking at people saying, why are you playing that game? You're putting up one front, but you're doing something else behind. And I had the same thing as a kid. I'd probably be diagnosed with all sorts of weird diagnoses today. But the fact is that those of us who have the high order types of genetics, or are part of the hybrid projects, or are part of the military projects, our brains works in different ways. And that's what I want to do with the whole academy, because when we work as change makers, we go in and say, okay, what are my skill sets? Where do I have, what force do I have? What's my power, so to speak? How can I go in and utilize that? And that's why I recommend you do the progression sciences first, because there you also get the skill set of, okay, if I'm going to work as a change maker, how can I put it into the frames of references of the principles of the true way that energy works in our reality field, the laws of energy and the rules of engagement? Because we are going to deal with the aliens whether we will it or not. We are living in a quadrant full of them, in universal structures that are full of them. So we will deal with that eventually. That's also another level that we can work with. So if we go in and say, okay, would I go in and work with the climate environment or the environmental changes and the climate crisis and the process that Greta has put onto her as a hybrid as part of that agenda? And she has definitely risen up awareness. She has really got youngsters to get out on the streets and say, yeah, we're not confident with that one. But she has also discovered which is clear in that documentary, and you're seeing it, you're seeing all of these political leaders, you're seeing all these fancy people, the Pope, whatever, wanted to get selfies with her, using her as a kind of self-promoting on Instagram or Twitter, whatever, or fighting against her and bullying her and being ridiculously aggressive to a 15-year-old girl. But she pushed buttons clearly, and there is this kind of engineering around her that either makes you love her or hate her. So that's kind of dividing the people around her, which she's engineered to do. And I know that she will not agree with me that she's engineered to do anything. Who would take that cape on themselves and say, yeah, I'm engineered to do a specific project? But this is where I come in and say, well, that's how I see the world. And she's doing a good job. She's definitely doing what she has the skill set for, to put it in a more pretty way. And she is activating the youngsters that have the same kind of genetic structure as she has. And she's mobilizing them, not as a kind of war, because they are discovering, and you can see that with the interview with the young people, they are out there, they're rallying, they are gathering, they have all of these people on the street, and they just, while they're there, it's a rush, the adrenaline is up, and it's all kind of, yeah, we're doing a difference, we're making a difference here. And then they understand, the policymakers are, yeah, they might listen for 2 days, and then they forget and move on in their own rut and in their old ways. And they are saying, well, it's up to you youngsters to make the differences, because we kind of played our part. And you have this whole kind of within science, if you haven't achieved the great breakthroughs until before you're 30, then you're kind of downhill, because you'll just be a repeat of all the others. So that's kind of where we're dealing with this one. So would I go in and do some kind of environmental work as a change maker? Yes, I could definitely. I would come up with different solutions where I would work with the higher order sciences, but within the scope of understanding the energies of our reality as a holographic energies. 4th dimensional, 5th dimensional, 6th dimensional, 7th dimensional. And what does that mean? And that's part of the psychic energetic method. I'm going to work on and say, okay, we have activated our potentials in the progression work. Some of you have, some of you haven't. But we are in the process of it. We are having 1 out of 10 people on the planet as a whole that are activating to some degree, and they need schooling. Because we have had this with the whole First and foremost, we've had the collapse of the projects. They have not led to what they were supposed to. The engineering has not led to what it's supposed to. The genetics are breaking down. The technology that were supposed to uphold these genetics are also breaking down because they rely on the old world order technologies that are also breaking down. Plus the sun that is shutting down the connection to the dark galactic core. So we have a lot of factors playing in here. And that's part of us as change makers, to realize that, to not naively go out and think, oh yeah, I could change the world and be an activist, and just to go through the same process, which I went through when I was 15 or 16 and I was in the Peace Corps and I was out there rallying. When I was young, we were rallying against the Cold War, against the nuclear war, the fear of a nuclear war. And I remember going through the processes of, okay, what does happen if we have a nuclear war? How will I do? What will I do? Will I try to survive? Will I prep? Will I go underground? What will I do? And I came to the conclusion, if the whole thing goes shit, if the shit hits the fan, everybody push the fucking button. That was in the 80s. Well, I'll just sit on a rooftop, and seriously, I'll just sit there and I'll just get blasted right away, because that will then, nobody, if that happens, that was my conclusion. We've seen it in movies, but in my understanding and how things are, we've been very close to already in the Cuba crisis, where we had with JFK and that whole process that we're going with the 13 men, you know, that good old movie with Costner, and these other groups that kind of put a very long, not very interesting movie, but very historical correct for once. But putting all of that into play, where you kind of say, well, it was clear we have, even within the policymakers, even within the military institutions, and we know that Richard Dolan talked about the breakaway civilizations. Others have as well, but he's just the one I prefer to listen to due to his scientific method and his educational background that has made him work with things in a way that we could say is less, sensation oriented, and more towards as in kind of, let's dig and investigate and actually come up with some evidence and put it on the table. Similarly as Stephen Greer, that also has worked in this method for years, and try to change and try to push the policymakers and try to get us to the point where we get the information. So all changes begins with information, begins with a new perception of reality, begins with new understanding of what the world is. That's the first step as change makers, aside from the personal work and the psychological challenges, as I also talk about in the 4 courses of a change maker, where you go in and understand you need to do kind of a SWOT analysis of yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? And what are the threats? What are you up against? And when we talk about change makers, many are idealists. So they don't see the threats. They have this idea that because I'm a good person, everybody else must be a good person somewhere or deep down. I just need to be kind and empathic, and love will conquer all, and what have you. And then you go out and discover there are some really nasty people out there. There are some really seriously nasty aliens, and everything is not good and fine, and you will get battered, and you will get kicked in the balls or in the stomach or in your chest or whatever, on your face or whatever. And you will kind of say, what the fuck? I did not count that in. I just thought that everybody was eager to create a better world. And I've actually on Coursera.org, I can only recommend that. You can do a lot of free courses on university level, and it's good material. Do it. It's really brilliant. Short videos, a lot of good information, and you can get a brush up on a lot of topics where you can get oriented towards a more, okay, this is actually how the world is perceived out there. This is actually what we're dealing with, and not what you want it to be, and not what you're projecting onto it, and not what you have ideas of what it is, which is what we talk about the spiritual movement. It's all love and light, and everybody's good and kind. We just need to go in our tribes and drink cacao and drum some drums and smoke some cannabis, and we're all good, fine, and best pals, and that will change the world. Of course not. because a predator is a predator. And that's part of where we need to go to understand what we're actually dealing with when we choose to become whole change makers. Because you could do social entrepreneurship where you fix things. And I talk about that in the courses too, where you go to Africa and try to solve irrigation issues, which are good. That's good. We got people doing that. And we got Greta doing the activation of the hybrid kids to get into an understanding. The next push, which I hope she will, she's having her own foundation. She is financing and investing in different projects that are leading to what we call businesses or fora or NGOs that are trying to create a new environmental consciousness where we understand we have got this planet. That's all we've got. That's the typical gray agenda. You have heard Jim Sparks that were put on board crafts along with other people, seeing these, sitting in front of screens, seeing that the fires are burning, the world was going under, we're destroying our environment, on and on and on and on. And it has not led to much change. Because where have all of these abductees, what have they done with their skill sets? Have they actually, has it worked, this subliminal coding that were used in the abduction techniques? Would it not be better, as they did with Jim Sparks, getting into closer direct contact, which they're doing now with those of us who are under that new set of their program, because they have progressed as well, quote unquote, developed their techniques. So now it's not this, because I demanded a long time ago, stop this fucking game of hiding. If you want to do something, let me know what we're dealing with. And that's a fucking nightmare, as Jim Sparks talks about as well. It's absolutely unpleasant. And it's a warrior training, and it's all depending on which program you're under. And it's very, very unpleasant. And some of my programming has been part of what we call military projects in a different manner than what we call the outer military projects that were part of the enhanced human projects. So we have had many different projects. So you can't just say, oh, military projects, that's the same. No, it's not. It's got different variations, different groups of aliens, different type of projects that are going on here, but they are all focusing in one direction. We are hitting a low point in our evolutionary journey that if we don't turn the ship around, this is it. So there we are. That we all agree on that one. And when I was in Israel as a young girl, I realized quickly that if it wasn't because of all the different types of religious versions of Judaism in Judah or in Israel, then they would probably fight each other as they did in earlier times, but they now kind of got an outer enemy that the Gaza Strip, sorry about that. The whole fighting with the Arabs and all of that, the Palestinian movement, all of that, they have got an outer enemy. And we've heard that as well. Wasn't it Ronald Reagan that said that perhaps it would be good if we kind of either got invaded or whatever, because then we would get an outer enemy and then we would unify. And I discovered that as a young girl as well. I saw all of these dynamics. I got it when I was young, which is actually why I wanted to study political theory. And I began that at the university. And then I just studied all of these leaders, males after males after males, and all of their stupidities. And I just wanted to vomit, because it was just kind of, yeah, they're just seeking power. They're just tooting their own horn. This is so personally driven. It has nothing to do with doing greater good for the world. Most leaders are all about literally just, yeah, I'm going to say something very nasty here, so I won't, but that's just what it is. So we need different types of understandings, and it's not, oh yeah, let's get females on the position. Yes, definitely we need more females, but we have got issues with quite a lot of females, as we're seeing it within Republicans in the US. And in Italy, we're having females now that are risen to power. Are they, yeah, they have what we call a vagina, but are they really energetically and consciously and in an energy system wise? What are they? Are they what they proclaim to be, or are we just having, as I talked about many other places, we have been in both types of bodies throughout the lifetimes we have had. So we are this whole kind of, are you male or female or whatever, comes down to, do you have a penis or a vagina? And that doesn't even count. It comes to the inner human. At the end, it comes to the inner human. And that's some of the hybrid kids that are working on that as well. So we got activists that are working at breaking down the cultural institutions of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, and going into this fluidity where we have gender fluidity, where I kind of say, well, as I experienced as a young girl as well. Some days I felt more like a male. Some days I felt more like a female. It kind of all depending on where I was and what type of hormones that kicked around in my body, what levels of my brain that were activated, and going through the different stages of the human evolution as the brain does, and go through past lives, subconscious influencing factors and patterns. Kind of all gives us a lot of weird subconscious influences that we are not always aware of, including if you are a part of the military projects, they can pull you in, and then suddenly, I can't remember the researcher, UFO researcher, her name, Sarah something, that also worked as a regressionist. She had a client who was completely heterosexual, and then the Greys decided, we need you to be homosexual for a while. And then he woke up one morning, he was completely homosexual, and then he lived for years with his partner, and then one day he woke up and then he was back to being straight. And you're just kind of, you can say you're straight if you're homo straight, or homo straight heterosexual. It doesn't matter. All of these classifications will vanish eventually. So the whole point is, you have females that used to be with males, they got tired of males, they find some woman that has empathy and is kind and caring and has this kind of beautiful soul, and they fall in love. And then they don't think about if it's a male or female or whatever it is. It all comes down to the inner human anyways. So who gives a shit if you have a vagina or a penis or whatever? They're just putting that one in there. So we're in that process as well. So when we talk about being a change maker, it's not just about social entrepreneurship, as in going in and help the developing countries, or having helping systems that are under some kind of developmental process that is not working well. That's part of it. But it's just as much working with systems of thought and patterns of change and sciences and knowledge and different types of information systems, where we go in and say, well, to begin any change, you need to change the narrative of who you think you are. You need to change the narrative of what you think reality is. And you need to change the narrative of what you think science are. Because when you go in and work with the narrative, who and what you are, you cross the borders and your own limitations of what you think you can do. And you push the boundaries into actually understand you can do so much more. And that's why I always recommend do exercise, because if you learn to run 10 kilometers, you will discover how much resistance your body actually has to being active. But once it goes over a certain amount of exercise, so to speak, where it begins to produce the correct types of hormones that kicks in and makes the body feel good, then it yearns for exercise. It's just kind of, I want to go out, I want to exercise, I want to exercise, where you have this whole kind of resistance in the beginning. So that's what you're dealing with in your body. Your body's engineered to give you resistance to whatever great idea you might have, both physically and psychologically. So that's part of the progression sciences, and that's part of the change maker skill set, where you learn to deal with your own resistance and how you're typically shooting yourself down before you even start anything. So that's part of the psychological process. And the physical process, of course. And in that physical process, I'm also saying, it goes without saying, you become a plant-fruitarian. I'm not even going to give that any discussion whatsoever. You're still eating meat. You're just too fucking stupid. Okay, you got enough evidence out there. 10 years ago, you could say, yeah, we are on the kind of in between. Now there's so much evidence out there. And if you kind of put it on, it's all false information. Yeah, okay, come on. This is where you rise up to the occasion and understand. Yeah, you don't do animal products. You don't sustainate yourself by the use of another living being. Of course not. Think. Use your brain for crying out loud, right? So that's not even up for discussion. And there's plenty of information out there how you can become plant-fruitarian and how you can do a plant-based diet. And there's a lot of alternatives out there. There's a whole industry now focused on that one on its own. So the next step of that one is not to become a plant-fruitarian, but actually learn to discern between the different food offers that you have. What should you actually buy? What should you support? because not everything that claims to be in the high level of what we could call sustainability and renewable energy and the CO2 footprint and all these kind of things are actually living up to what they are talking about. And Greta talks about that greenwashing, and others are doing that as well, where we have a lot of companies that are saying the right buzzwords, but they are not living up to what they are promising. So that's the next step of our journey here, is to actually not being so naive and trusting, and in going in and investigate, actually look up, okay, what is that company? Who is the CEO? What is going on there? Which agenda is behind that company? Who's actually, and when I say agenda, I both mean within the base program. Is it a pure profit company? That could be okay, but are they also having some kind of environmental impact that is in a positive direction? We kind of call these both the non-profit as well as the pro-profit companies that are now working with environmental changes, that are also having as part of their business to have a positive impact on the environment, as in not just greenwashing, not just buying off their CO2 emission by trading that one as a kind of yeah, it's just trading off. I got the English word for that one. So just trading it off, and then in that one getting others that are not using their quote, and then trying to, what you call it, trade these quotes, which are ridiculous, because that is so, it's almost criminal in a way, because that just kind of, yeah, I'm keeping myself under the bar or the limits of what we allowed by trading others that are not using, instead of just taking that responsibility. Come on, people, take that fucking responsibility. How difficult is it? Why do you keep moving in that old, the stakeholders and the CEOs and the board and blah, blah, blah. Everybody wants to have profit. Okay, let us put that one on the table and say, we're not doing this for profit. Let's change that whole idea of profit making and say, yes, you can earn money. That's okay. But you're also investing that money in our environmental changes. You're also investing that money in new technology. You're also investing that money in solutions that will assist and rebuild the world that we are part of. Come on. How difficult can it be? How many fucking dollars do you want to have on the bank account? Because what's the point of all of these money? And that's kind of where we go with the private contractors. Quite a lot of these were engaged in some of these little bit more suspect COVID operations that we are dealing with. And we have got a lot of people out there as part of the rogue nations that have already embarked on a completely secondary type of society. And some of them are also working with aliens. Some of them are not. And that's part of the military projects, all of these COVID operations, that's been going on. That's also part of the awakening process, where you realize people are not what you think they are. We are not that far behind. The technologies are already there. We know that. Stephen Greer's talked about that. A lot of researchers have talked about that. So what do we do about it? That's the next step. You got the information now. We had that whole generation of good people that were teaching us things. The world is not what you think it is. Wake up. Come on. Now we're at the next step. Okay, the next step is where people go out and rally, thinking that will change. We are now getting people that have rallied. We have had enough rallies, except from around the planet, as I talked about in my early YouTube videos a couple of years ago, where you have rallies and protesters that are turning governments around and are changing governments and overthrowing presidents and what have you. And then you got that feeling. But then we come down to the nitty-gritty architecture of, okay, what are we then going to do? Yeah, it was easy when we had that idiot in the chair, and we could all look at that idiot and say, well, it's his fault or her fault, and they're the ones that are ruining our country because they are bad political leaders. Okay, now you got the political leader that you like, and you kind of, the political leader is up against the issue like everybody else. Just because you're leading something does not mean you're actually capable of instigating the changes that has to be done. So, and even though you institute a law and say, well, that's the legislation and that is how we're going to do it, it's not the same as people are going to follow the law. Just because you get the information is not the same as people act on the information. Just because you go out and raise your voice and say, this is unfair and whatever. Good, do that. But what do you also do? Next step, how do we implement that? How do we change the world? That's the question we need to ask ourselves now. All of us, we're in the same boat, whether you're Indigo or Crystal or Hybrid or military project, whatever's going on. go in and say, okay, we had that whole period of 50 years where we kind of got ourselves out of our oblivion, lulled in by the old world order prohibiting technologies, and all of that's breaking down. We're waking up. What are we doing with it? What are we doing about it? And what's the next step? How do we challenge ourselves to develop and progress into a line of thinking and a way of thinking that actually leads to change? And this is where I talk about in both the changemaker material and the new reality material. Information is not just about knowing stuff. Information is actually used to change your energy system. So what you look on and what you focus on, you give energy, and what you give energy will feed back to you via principle 4. So this is where you're going to understand the principles. The principles are not religious, spiritual, principles of this is how you become a good human. They're actually ways to use your consciousness potentials in complex energy systems, in realities that have feedback loops and amplification vectors that are running on specific developmental programs. And in that, they are kind of what you could say guidelines for a behavior that will allow the reality field you're part of to mirror back to you that type of energy that will actually rebuild your energy system. Not about, oh yeah, I'm a moral good person. I'm doing the right things. I'm a good human. That's part of it, but that's a psychological value system, because what is actually good behavior? Good behavior is when you're in alignment with the energy of the reality field you're part of, and you're transforming that, amplifying that into progressive dynamics. And that can have many different features. So you can't say change maker is this or that or whatever. We're going to work with that on many, many different levels. And that's part of the 5th cycle, to get to that knowledge. And many of you still, as I said, struggling with the heart field and get that one amplified, and you're being prohibited and pushed back and wiped and cleared and blah, and what have you. And so have I. And that's a struggle, and it's damn annoying, and it is completely unfair. And we can have all sorts of childish emotional reactions to it. But we just need to lift above and say, yeah, that's the game. So how do we get equipped to play that fucking game with these ridiculous other types of souls that are present on a planet that wants to hold and pull us into the abyss if it was up to them, for whatever reason that is, because they think that that will resume and return them to the previous universal structure under the D13 collective, or they are so affected by the timeline of energies that they don't really think in ways that we do. I've seen some of these, and they are definitely not thinking as we are. So you can't put on normal logic as in kind of, okay, come on. And I mentioned that in the CETA, or not the CETA, but the C forum. I changed that. I actually wanted to call it the Systemic Energetic Transformational Awareness, and that was CETA, but it just kind of, it was too close to with the set and the CETA gray, so just kind of, yeah, that doesn't really work. So just do the C, and that's kind of goes with when I do the higher order Systemic Energetic. If you short that down, it's hose, and you do C, so you have water, you have channel, you have that idea with the hose that just pushing an enormous amount of water, because someone called me actually as in when I give information, it's like a hose. I'm just kind of with huge amounts of energy at the same time, an amount of information, because it works in clusters. So I'm just giving that pattern, seeding it in and saying that's the entire pattern, instead of giving you a little bit here and there, because my brain and how I work is not linear. I work in clusters. I work in patterns of change. I work with holographic features. That means everything I get is a full package. And when I do all of this talking here and there and everywhere, I'm just trying to get as many nodal points of the pattern, so you get the overview, so you can connect the dots and understand the idea here. And I know many of you are not used to thinking that manner, so you feel overwhelmed and you can't connect the dots. So the dots are here, as in this podcast where I'm putting out here, is that we have many different forms of being change makers. But as a whole change maker, we work with energy, and we work with energy to transform energy according to the original ideas of the Pillar Project. And that goes with using the principles, the rules, and the laws. And that means we're preparing ourselves to be able to work with the different extraterrestrials that are in our system and outside our system. And we're dealing with them on a daily basis as part of our everyday life. So that's a completely different mindset. and we learn to discern between what is actually encounters and what are programs. And unfortunately, because of the state of our system, and most of these groups have left, what they have done is that they have just left technology that's now running the show, and there's not much what we could say actual alien encounters. There are most of the scavengers that are coming in from different levels of the reality because of a low level energetic state. So they are able to get in now because we are in that low frequency, so to speak. The vibrational state and the viability rate of our system is extremely low now. So they can enter. And then we have got what remains of the grays of the different projects, and they are completely falling apart. They are a sad show, and they're kind of running around like headless chicken, to be honest. That's my personal experience, including the ones that are put on the military projects, the maintainers and what have you. They're not doing a great job because the technology behind them is falling apart, or they are getting taken over by the scavengers, which then comes in and use it for their personal type of entertainment and getting some kind of vibrational electrochemical high by having fun times inside the system, which we're also seeing with the perversion and all the things that are going on. So we are in trouble. I just might be completely honest that I saw that years ago. I knew that as a child. I was dreaming about that as a child. I already got it. I knew that something had to change foundationally and fundamentally. And all people, as Greta also said, well, you're playing weird roles. Why are you playing these weird roles as in kind of you're going on the stage and then you put on a performance? Why are you doing that? Why are you not just being authentic? Why are we not dealing with things as they should? And why are people not interested in making these changes? And here in my mid-50s, I'm kind of, okay, I kind of get that now. Okay, it's a little bit more difficult than I anticipated. And it's quite much more as in, okay, we need all hands on deck if we're going to solve this. So this is all when it comes into strength in numbers, but strength in numbers is not just about knowing stuff. You need to do something with what you know. And that's the next set of the changemaker. And I will talk a little bit about that in the next podcast. Thank you.